It's a real pleasure to welcome Eleanor Stead, who is the Deputy National Giving Advisor for the National Church Institutions. She's spent over the last 10 years helping to grow the profile of giving within the church and supporting both dioceses and parishes. Her particular specialisms are legacy fundraising and capital appeals. She has a degree in theological studies from Exeter University, originally from the Wye Valley, and she's now broadcasting to us from her family home in Bristol. Eleanor, so good to have your time this afternoon, and welcome.
Thank you very much. Right, shall I make a start?
Please do, yes.
Super, lovely. Well, thank you very much for having me. It's lovely to be virtually in the Diocese of Guildford. I think it's been a couple of years since I've been there last. I have been around for a decade, and I think one of the first legacy workshops I did was in Guildford, so it's really nice to be back. Okay, so I'm just going to share my screen, bear with me, and then we'll get going. Okay, can you all see my screen okay?
Yes.
Yeah. Yes. Super, all right. Okay, so just going to quickly provide a brief agenda. So I'll aim to talk intermittently for about half an hour, and that gives us about half an hour's worth of conversation and questions and chat. I've just had some throat surgery, so I'd be very grateful if I can hear from other people in the room as well as myself. But just going to really talk about why legacies are important, why we're encouraging them in your parishes, some simple things that you can do to encourage legacies, 3 calls to action that we want attendees to take away with them after the webinar, and then talk about the Fair Will online free will writing offering, answer any questions you've got, and then open up the floor for discussion. I will pause in between as well if you've got any questions or you want to just have a bit of a sense check in terms of the content that we've covered, but hope that looks all right, not too onerous, I'm sure. Okay, so if we could just open with a prayer, that would be super. Lord of all, we thank you for all of those who have walked before us in the way of Christ, those who have shared their faith and love with us, and those who have been generous benefactors of church, nation, and world by the lives they have lived and the inheritance that they have left to us who come after. Grant that we may be faithful stewards of all that you have entrusted to us, that all people may know your love and all creation come to share your glory. Amen.
Amen.
Thank you. Okay, so let's get going. So what is a legacy? What is a gift in a will? It's basically when somebody leaves an individual or a charitable organisation property or money. That's what it is. So if I'm talking about legacies, I'm also talking about gifts and wills. And legacies are just a really fantastic opportunity for our parishes financially, because they're worth around £60 million to our parish economy each year. That's a huge amount of money, £60 million to our parishes. And quite often, we don't even know that they're coming, and we don't know the people who they come from. So a real opportunity for growth and catalysts for one-off projects. Secondly, they're a really important part of Christian giving. So we talk about the importance of regular giving, of supporting our parish church, and we should be talking about the importance of legacies, because legacies are just a gift. They're a gift in a will. They're just another way of expressing thankfulness for a lifetime's worth of blessings. They're just another gift. It might not feel appropriate to you as an individual to leave a legacy, in the same way that it might not be appropriate for somebody else to leave or to give regularly through a standing order or a direct debit. It's just another way to give. So whenever we talk about giving, whenever we talk about Christian generosity, whenever we talk about discipleship, we are also talking about legacies. And legacies are incredibly life-affirming. One of the reasons that they often get left out is because it's like, oh gosh, death, money and taxes, no thank you. But they're not. The individual chooses to leave a legacy when they're alive, therefore they are their living wishes. They're only activated by death. So it's a very positive decision that somebody makes during their lifetime to leave a legacy. What happens is they're just not around when the gift is activated. So they're a financial opportunity, they're part of our Christian giving because they are just another way to give. And the individual gives that gift whilst they are alive because they include it in their will. They're their living wishes, they're appropriate for us to talk about. Also, we are Christians, we do believe in life after death. So I think it's additionally appropriate for us as a charity to talk about legacies. And finally, legacy fundraising is very gentle. You're not going out into the street with clipboards, not sending you knocking on people's doors. It is just about saying, look, we're here, we're a charity. You can leave a legacy to your church, and here's how you go about it. So it's very gentle, it's very drip drip. The calls to action today are not scary, not intimidating. They're just 3 simple things that you can do. And also, you know, legacy fundraising doesn't change. It's been around for hundreds of years. It's one of the oldest ways that people can support support charities with gifts. So once it's set up, it pretty much runs itself. It's just about ensuring that you remind people from time to time. Does that sound all right to everyone? Yeah. Slow, gentle. Oh, I've got the graveyard slot, haven't I? It's 2 o'clock. Terrible timing for a legacy session. Okay, let me gear it up a bit. Okay, so legacy giving for the charity sector. Like I said, it's £60 million for churches. It's £3 billion for the charity sector. So here are some of the big players in the legacy sector. Cancer Research UK, £187 million in legacies each year. And as you can see from these charities, it's often between 50 and 70% of their total income. So for the Church of England, right at the end there, the purple bar, it's clearly not. It's 7% of our total income. So we don't talk about legacies a lot because we're not as dependent on them. If we were as dependent as these charities, we would be asking for legacies a lot more. But it's okay. As you can see, we've got a really big purple bar of individuals, £800 million that our people give to our parish churches each year. They're generous, they're philanthropic, they're incredibly supportive gifts. And that means that because legacies are a culmination of a lifetime's worth of support, there is a real opportunity to grow our legacy income. So although you won't see an immediate impact from encouraging legacies, it really can make a big difference. And it is by far the biggest margin, the biggest market that we've got in terms of growing income. Also, I would say, don't think that this lot here, your regular givers aren't leaving legacies to these big charities, because a lot of them will be. And it's not about removing those legacies. On average, people leave around 3 legacies in their wills. So it's about saying, look, a lot of you will be leaving legacies to your favourite charitable causes. Just remember, your church family is also a charity, and we would welcome a gift in your will. So a real opportunity for parishes, but also when we look at the charity sector, a glaringly obvious opportunity in terms of financial growth. All right, I'm just going to come out of the presentation a sec and just see if anybody has any thoughts or feedback to share about those particular stats around giving. This is where I'm met by stunned silence. People say, not me.
Are you sharing all this with us afterwards? Is there going to be any online information coming out afterwards?
Yes, very good question, Patricia. So the PowerPoint presentation will be circulated. The webinar is being recorded, so it will be available online. And I'll also do a shortened version as well. So don't worry, you don't have to remember these stats.
Can you just repeat what the average is? I'm not sure if you said it, the average of those other charities.
It's usually between 50 and 70% of their total voluntary income is legacies. So they're incredibly dependent on their legacy income. For us in the Church of England, it's 7%.
So why do you think that actually is? Because if we are so generous, giving 800 million a year, why do people not give legacies to the church?
That's a great question, Andy. I'd rather you answered it than me. You got any thoughts?
Well, my thoughts, I mean, we don't like to talk about it. We're embarrassed. We just don't ask, because it's talking to predominantly elderly people we're looking at, asking them to give something when they die. So it's imminent death. And although we do believe in life after death, that's why we're here. It's about resurrection life. It's about that. We somehow are embarrassed to talk about it. But I don't really know why that is. It's just history, is it? I don't know.
It's really interesting. Yeah, I mean, I'd say it's sort of a British thing, but other charities are very good at asking.
Yeah.
But I think, a big part of webinars like this is just to give people permission. I find that it's okay to ask. We can talk about this. It's important. And I also have a very strong feeling that if we're not talking about it, who is? People often review their wills, hatchings, matchings, dispatchings. It's often incredibly important points in people's lives where the church is often involved. So if anyone's talking about it, we should. But yeah, you're bang on, Andy. We don't talk about it.
Perhaps we should talk about it earlier in people's lives, so it just becomes an absolute norm that we're actually talking about it from an early stage of people being involved in the Christian life.
Love that, Patricia. Yeah, absolutely. And that's why we're finding that with the online will offering that we've been doing, the majority of people who are writing their wills and leaving their first legacies are aged between 40 and 55. So actually, if people are thinking about the church with their first will, they're 3 times more likely to leave a legacy to that organization. So when people are, having marriage preparation, buying a house for a mortgage, you need a will. When you have children, you need guardians. Guardians are different to godparents. So again, there are opportunities that we as the church are involved in. So yes,
is there any research into how much money charities are spending on television advertising for legacies? Because I seem to see television advertising all the time. And I mean, while we're talking about these things, maybe we ought to sort of say, is this not something the national church should be investing in, a television advertising campaign?
It's a great question, Peter. I don't know about, generally fundraising budgets for legacies are massively increasing, particularly because of the pandemic, because it's becoming even more important, because people have been reduced in terms of membership. So yes, charities are investing more and more in legacies. And I've just got funding for the online free will writing service. It took me 10 years. So maybe in another 10 years, we'll have a TV campaign. But yeah, absolutely. Let's keep lobbying. Yes, David.
Just to add to that, unlike charities which are seeking to attract a national audience for a fundraising proposition, we have our donors in front of us every Sunday for hours. Those who listen to my sermons will say. So there is plenty of opportunity to get this message over. I mean, I'm finding it fascinating. There's one church which is a very faithful member, old lady, and she went to be with the Lord, and she left her house to the Cats Protection League. So the message that Christian causes depend upon Christian donors is a really, really important one for it to get over. I'm pleased that all these charities are advertising so much, because they are promoting the concept of legacies. So, and everybody will be used to getting direct mail and messages and all sorts of things saying, give us a legacy. So we ought to be confident that we're operating in that background. I think there's also something about writing a will, that there is a view that if you write a will, you will die. Now, statistically, you are quite likely to die anyway at some point. But there is that view. And I was listening to a sermon by Tim Keller, where he said, he had so many good Christian families in his church. Somebody dies, the will hasn't been thought through, or they die intestate, and there is then a horrible family squabble. And teaching that it's part of loving your family to order your affairs well, and as part of that, you can bless the church. And because the Chancellor is such a blessing, if you get this right, the inheritance tax mitigation is so substantial that your family won't be much out of pocket anyway. So it's a really exciting area. Sorry, back to you, Eleanor.
No, it was great, David. Yeah, thank you. Absolutely. We do. I think charities would kill to have their members in front of them every week like we do. Okay. All right. I'm going to go back to the presentation and then I'll come out of it again because I think this is much more interesting having a chat than looking at a PowerPoint. So as my good friend said, you have to ask. That is number one way to encourage legacies. The biggest motivating factor. It's not how much money you have or whether you're updating your will. It's nothing to do with that. The biggest motivator for people leaving a legacy is that they're asked. And if you don't ask, you don't get. And if you take nothing away from today, if you don't ask, you don't get. So we did some research. We found only 15% of Anglicans have ever been asked to support their church by leaving a legacy. That's just mind-boggling. So that's 75% of people who don't know that they can leave a legacy to their church. I reckon 98% of my inquiries over the past decade have been either a solicitor, an individual, or a church asking if they can leave a legacy to a church, if a church is a charity. People just don't know. It's basic information providing legacy fundraising, if anything else. So we've all got that point. I suppose that the other point that I'd just like to focus on, and then we can have another chat, is about who you're asking to leave a legacy to. So, sorry, that sounded very Welsh, didn't it? Who you're asking to leave a legacy to your church. You've got your church members, so you've got that worshipping congregation, you've got church volunteers, a lot of church volunteers, they give a huge amount in terms of time and talents, and then they also give through a legacy. But you've also got a whole other side, the community. So many churches have said to me in the past, you know, we had no idea who this person was, and they left us half of their estate. They left us a huge gift of £20,000. And the point I always make is, well, you didn't know them, but they knew you. Your church was important to them. And it doesn't matter why. It was important to them enough that they actually gave the largest gift they've probably ever given. So we are really thinking about community as well as church members. Local and former residents. Legacies can be left by people who've just walked their dog past your church every day, who recognise the church as a physical symbol of their local area. Visitors, tourists, if you've got, you know, a really lovely peal of bells and you have bell ringers coming. I mean, you probably get legacies for bells, but they're still legacies. Think about what your unique selling point is of your church, and often it's the fact that you are local. Hatchings, matchings and dispatchings. Legacies are incredibly emotive, nostalgic gifts. Often people will leave a legacy because they got married there 50 years ago, or their children went to Sunday school there, or their father had a wonderful funeral, or their parents are buried in the graveyard. That's why legacy marketing and messaging is so important, because you want to make sure there's information in the church, but also that the community can access. Okay, that's probably all I'd say on that. Just to highlight these call to actions, how are we asking? So I've said about who we're asking, how are we asking? It's really simple how we're asking. We're just starting with a thank you. Always start with a thank you. It's a gift. Adding information, making it clear how to leave a legacy. Ensuring that mechanism, that free will is there. It's easy to do, it's important to do, and you can do it for free. And then making sure that legacies are just there as a constant. So whenever you're thinking about giving, you're thinking about legacies. I will move on to how we're going to do those 3 actions and give you some templates. But for now, I just thought, we've already had one already, but it would just be nice to share some stories. Like I said, the first motivating factor for leaving a legacy is being asked. The second is being inspired. So we need those inspiring stories. So it'd be great if you could all have a little think and see if you have heard of a legacy that's been left to your church that you thought that's a great story, or you know of one of a neighbouring church. I'll give you a couple of minutes to have a think, unless anyone's got one straight away.
I have got one.
Fiona has, yes. Oh, and Andy has, super. Okay, Fiona then Andy, lovely.
It was very interesting because we were going to do a stewardship campaign in a previous church where I was vicar, and we were sitting down to have our first meeting. I was a bit nervous about it all, and my church warden said, "Oh, did you get that letter today or something?" And I went to look for the letter she was talking about, but found I hadn't opened a very thick looking letter. So I opened the thick looking letter, and lo and behold, it was a legacy as we started our stewardship meeting. And it was a legacy from a woman I didn't know. It was a legacy from a woman who never came to church, who people thought actually had no money at all, and who a church member and his wife had walked her dog. And because she had no other family, she decided, because they walked her dog, she would leave all her money to the church.
Wow.
That's amazing. Wow. Always dogs, always animals with legacies. Yeah. They're always in there somewhere. Thank you so much for sharing that. Wow, what a way to welcome to a PCC meeting. Super. Andy, would you like to share your story?
Well, this is not current at all in a way. I've been in the church 10, 11 years now, but we have a charity, a charitable trust associated with the church that stretches back 35 years when a gentleman named Sam, who I don't know the history of whether he's a churchgoer or a local, but he left his cottage in the village to the church. And what that has bequeathed is a trust fund that has allowed us to purchase a house for our youth worker. We've still got a mortgage on it, but it's gone a long way towards it. And it's got other money associated with it we can use for various things that from time to time in the church life. So amazing what a single legacy from one gentleman has done.
That's incredible. 35 years of generosity.
What is even worse, though, is we know about it, but do we publicise it? Do we tell the current congregation, look what this gentleman did? No, that's a lesson for me. That's what we're going to do.
Good. And actually, that's how you start your legacy campaign. Lovely. Thank you so much, Andy. I love that. 35 years of generosity. Beautiful. Anybody else got one to share?
Add something. I'm probably at the other end of the scale. I'm not aware of any significant legacies that we've received. I'm in the finance team now, hence being on the call. So I suspect that our percentage is, even lower than 7% of our total giving comes from legacies. We do quite well with one-off gifts from time to time. So last week, £5,000 came into the account from parishioners who just knew that the church needed money, and so they gave. So I think, the biggest lesson so far is don't be embarrassed about talking about it, because other charities are doing it, and I get the letters the same as the rest of us from other charities. So that's really very helpful so far. Thank you.
That's great. Thanks, Andrew. Yeah, and individuals who give one-off gifts, again, you're sort of warm donors, so they're more likely to leave a legacy. Lovely. Okay, any other stories from anyone else?
I know one of our congregation actually organised a seminar, and it must have been about 10 years ago. And I think there's an issue that it probably takes 10 years for fruition to happen, because in the pandemic, we basically were praying because our boiler had extinguished itself, had insurance paid up. But in that year, 2020, we had £70,000 paid to us with 2 legacies, which were totally unexpected. And basically, I think that has saved the church from real problems. And I know when I stand up at the APCM and give the Treasurer's report, I can give the bad news that last year we had very small legacies, but the good news is you're stood in front of me, so I'm going to talk about it in the new year in our next campaign, because it isn't just giving. The legacies is an enormous sort of fund, sort of raising. It's available and it's tax based. You'll come on to all that in due course, I've no doubt. So it saved us enormous problems.
I love that. Thank you so much, Mark.
Prayer does help as well, I think.
Yes, prayer definitely helps. Yeah, and all else fails.
And let's not forget that.
Eat cake and pray. Yeah, it's 7 to 10 years for the average legacy campaign to come to full fruition. But you should start to see impacts from 5 years. So yes, it might not happen in your. That's why I've been here a decade. I'm expecting loads of legacies to come. But yeah, it's not immediate, but it's definitely once you've built the foundations, then you will see an impact. Lovely, thank you so much. Any last thoughts or stories or comments from anyone?
I can comment on 2 or 3 things. Over the past 20 years, we've had about £250,000 of legacies without really trying.
Wow.
On top of that, we were gifted a house, which enabled us to actually buy a buy-to-let flat, bringing us some income. Also, going back before that, there was a legacy for the upkeep of the church, which brings in a few thousand a year, and also a legacy which was originally to augment the incumbent stipend, but the terms of that were changed to provide clergy expenses, which helps on the cash flow. And we also have a friends organisation, and that was left a large legacy, and it's got about $500,000 in its account, available for supporting the fabric. So last year we had our lighting replaced because the lighting controls failed, so they have paid for that, and we're hoping that they are going to pay for a new heating system, because of the 3 boilers that we have, only 1 is working.
Thank you, Nick. That's a lot of legacy as well. Just imagine what you did if you actually actively promoted and encouraged. That's incredible. I do love that as well. Lighting and heating, that's 2 things that older people will generally pay for. It's very valued. So that's wonderful that you've been able to support the church with those legacies. Super. Okay. If you've got any further stories or comments, do just put them in the chat, or you can, we can share them at the end of the webinar. But I do just want to get on to, some more of the technical stuff around the free online will offering, as I expect there'll be lots of questions from there. So I'm going to go back to sharing my screen. Super. So we've talked about the importance of legacies, financial, we've heard about the financial opportunity. We know that you have to ask, and also that you have to inspire. What you'll remember from this session is those stories that you've just heard from fellow parishioners and from fellow churches. So do keep telling those stories. Because we're different from other large charities, it's not always clear what legacies would be spent on. So by sharing these stories, talking about how we've used legacies in the past, that just helps to cement some ideas for people in terms of how legacies would be used in the future. Contrary to belief, 60% of legacies left to the church are unrestricted on average over the past 10 years. So people do generally leave unrestricted gifts, which obviously gives us freedom and to be able to use the legacies when we really need them. So we have this wonderful new mechanism now, as well as asking and inspiring. We can also say, look, will writing is important, so much so that we've invested in free online wills. I think from the first legacy webinar, workshop in person back in the day, I was asked, why don't we have a free will writing service? And a decade later, I've got one. So it's here. So please use it, because otherwise it will be taken off me. Will writing, you can't have a legacy without having a will to put in it. So we've always maintained that even if you just write a will after hearing about a legacy campaign, that's enough for us. It's written in the Book of Common Prayer. Granted, it's in the Visitation of the Sick, but I think it was Patricia said, it's better that actually you write your will when you're in health rather than when you're on death's door. So in the Book of Common Prayer, it says, let him be admonished to make his will for the better discharging of his conscience. You definitely feel better when you know that your loved ones are provided for. And David really highlighted this in a much nicer way than I'm going to. But, I've just had my second child. He's a year old now, but we still haven't updated our guardians, and we haven't added him into the will. Mainly because nobody wants to look after 2 children. We had quite a few offers for 1 child, but apparently 2 children, no thank you. So I do feel quite unrest about the fact that I haven't got that sorted. And I'm in my mid-30s, and I'm on my 5th will. So it is really important to make sure that your will is written and up to date, and it's more relevant to people than you think it might be. for the quietness of his executors. So the worst legacy you can leave a loved one is to not write a will. It's incredibly emotionally difficult and expensive to administer an estate where there is no will. If the estate is intestate, it's very hard work. It's not a nice thing to leave someone. And then, like we said, you should do it whilst you're in health. So it's, again, it's a message for the living. It's the life affirming. It's important that people keep it up to date and that they do it whilst they're in health. So as an organisation, as the church, will writing is important. So much so that we've invested £40,000 a year for the next 3 years in free online wills for our church members. So we've partnered with a company called Fair Will. They work with most charities, and they're voted the best on Trustpilot. The reason we went online is because of COVID, and it's a really great tailored process, a tailored journey for the church. So how it works, you have a voucher code which you enter at the end of the checkout, and then your will is free. It is for simple, straightforward wills. If you've got a very complex estate, it's not going to work for you. But that's the same with any free online, free will writing service. It always has to be a simple estate that you're administering. So we don't have telephone wills because churches are quite complex, but what this does do is it's a tailored journey, it's bespoke, and it links to a church near you. So it will pull your individual church details, and it will bring up a map for the individual to be able to find their church. The wonderful thing about a Fair Will is it's easy, it's safe, it's legal, it's quick. Every will is checked by their legal team. I have monthly catch-ups with them and their legal team to discuss any queries or questions that have come up. The best thing is there's 2 asks within the process. So we talked about you have to ask. This does it for you as well, and it doesn't only do it once, it does it twice. It asks you first time round when you're looking at your estate or property percentages, and then it asks you again when you're divvying up your cash and chattels. So we found that we've just received £1 million in additional income through this in less than 2 years. 1 in 4 wills written by Fair Will include a legacy to a parish church. 97% are residuary gifts. So residuary gifts are percentages of estates. And obviously their average gift size is a lot larger because you've got property involved. So the average gift size is around £17,000 through Fair Will. So I'll say this again. We're seeing 97% of residuary gifts, the larger gifts, and the average gift size is 17,000 through Fair Will. Normally, if a legacy campaign is run in a church not using Fair Will, 20% are residuary, and the average size is £3,000. So actually being able to promote and offer this free online will, we're seeing much larger legacies coming through to our parish churches. So it's a real no-brainer, really. And I'm really pleased that we're able to offer it. So in terms of how you promote it, like I said, there's a direct web link. If you just put in Guildford Diocese, it will take you directly to the Fair Will Guildford Diocese page, and then it will automatically enter that voucher code for the individual. So the will be free. You can emphasize that it's a time limited offer. So dioceses we're working with, I'm giving them X amount of wills. I think Guildford it's 30 I've given. If you say, we've got, it just makes people more likely to use the code and write their will, because we all know that writing a will is something that we all will get round to eventually. Now then, I should say, if you suddenly, if we see 30 wills written by parishes in Guildford Diocese, I'm not going to turn off the tap, okay? I'm going to keep supporting you, but people don't have to necessarily know that. If you don't hit 30 wills, then I'm obviously not going to allocate more. Oh, and then just if you are including information either in a leaflet or in the notices or on your website, it's a really obvious place to do it. Just make sure you include that clear call to ask, highlighting that legacies are important, that they're a part of Christian giving. And then if you can, just a line or two about a legacy that you've received, that inspiring story. And it just means that when the person does go through to write their will and they are asked outrightly, would you like to leave a legacy to your church? Those seeds have been planted about why legacies are important and that they can be left to the church. Okay. Practical points, and then I'll come out because I expect everyone will have lots and lots of questions. How does this work? Well, all PCCs are charities. They all have charitable status. Therefore, again, using the online free will writing service just means that you take that question out of the equation, because they know, and their solicitors know, and their legal team know, that if somebody includes a church to their a legacy to their church, yes, it has charitable status. It will be exempt from inheritance tax. So all PCCs have charitable status. The proper receiving body for a legacy is the parochial church council. They will only be a registered charity if your income is over 100,000. So even if you don't have a registered charity number, you are still have charitable status, and any gift left to your church will be exempt from inheritance tax. Does that make sense? I can repeat it again if people want me to. And then David's already mentioned the inheritance tax. Again, it's a motivator for some people, not for everyone, but if you do leave 10% of your estate to charity or charities, so again, it could be the church and 3 other charities that you want to, there's a reduction of the inheritance tax paid from 40% to 36%, which is very significant, especially if the person has a property or multiple properties. Okay, so I'm going to stop sharing there. I'm just going to give everybody a moment to digest that and ask any questions or feedback they have on encouraging people to write a will, some of the legalities, I suppose, around the practical points of leaving a legacy to a church, and then any questions on Fair Will and the free online will offering.
Hello.
Hi, Gerald.
2 quick questions. Did you say that the free will offering, the free will service rather, is time limited, or did I misunderstand that? And you talked about there being 30 available for Guildford, but did you say there's a time limit on it as well, or not?
We found in our promotions that if we say to people, it's time limited, we have X amount of legacy of free wills, people generally complete them quicker. They take advantage of them. So it's just a sort of top tip, really. You can sort of say, Guildford's participating, we've been allocated 25 wills, it's first come, first served. Make the most of this opportunity now. It's just a bit of a sales pitch. And any dioceses that I've worked with haven't gone over 35 wills yet. So if you can be, if Guildford can be the first, then I welcome it.
Okay. My second question, quickly, was, did I misunderstand you? I thought you said that PCCs with an income of under 120,000, did you say, or 100,000 or something, are not, don't have charitable status? But I thought all PCCs have charitable status.
You're right. All PCs have charitable status, but if a PCC has an annual income under 100,000, they will not have a registered charity number. So a registered charity number and charitable status are 2 different things. But often when a solicitor is writing a will, they'll see that a church, it's like 70% of churches don't have income over 100,000. They'll see it doesn't have a registered charity number and say, oh, well, it can't be a charity. But it is a charity.
It is.
It's just that you don't have income over 100,000. So, you know, can you imagine the Charity Commission having like 9,000 churches tomorrow trying to register for charitable status? It'd be a nightmare. So they're like, no, thank you. That's fine. We recognise your charities.
Okay.
And indeed, that was the status a few years ago, that they decided that accepted churches should have to register, but there were so many of them that they put a threshold in of 100,000. I believe the Charity Commission are still talking about reducing that threshold, but the date for that implementation keeps being pushed back.
Yeah, I think we've been given another 5 years. They haven't got enough staff, basically. That's what I understand. So, yeah.
If there is an issue about proving your charitable status, then use your gift aid claim number.
Absolutely. Thank you, Nick.
Thank you.
Eleanor, can I ask a question?
Of course you can, Michael.
If somebody's using the free online service and gets into difficulty, is there any help desk or helpline or ability for them to get help?
Yeah, absolutely. So there's a helpline that they can call. Quite often it will sort of kick you out if it feels that you're not appropriate for the journey. So if your estate and requirements are too complex, what will often happen, it will pause it and then somebody from Farewell will give you a ring. But yeah, there's a support desk, there's a legal team on hand, and any queries or questions you've got, you can always just email me at Church Legacy and I can get in contact with them.
Great, thank you.
Okay.
Great, thanks.
Yes, David.
A couple of this is really powerful and helpful, Eleanor, thank you. A couple of co-drafting points. Firstly, we've established that churches under the current 100,000 threshold still obviously are charities and therefore can receive wills with the appropriate tax relief being given to the testator. In terms of wording, if a solicitor says, solicitors will know their stuff, but if they're going to go, oh, what's the charity number? Presumably, it is sufficient just to write in the name of the church and the parish. But perhaps you could confirm that. The second thing, we've had a message on the chat, somebody saying whether there's an existing will and there's therefore the need to introduce a codicil to that will rather than rewriting it to make an additional legacy gift. Is there a standard form of wording for the codicil?
Sure, thank you, David. So the codicil, generally solicitors don't like codicils now, and quite often they'll offer to rewrite the will for free rather than use a codicil. So we did have a codicil template, but on the advice from our legal team at Church House, we removed it. So my understanding is if somebody wants to include a legacy and they want to include a codicil, then they should say to their solicitor, oh, you know, we've heard that actually a lot of solicitors will rewrite it for free.
Okay.
And then your first question, leaving
a legacy to a charity under the 100,000. The solicitor asks for a charity number.
So you just confirmed that legacies are that all PCCs hold charitable status, and that is to do with your annual income. And again, if they've got any questions or queries, then the solicitor can contact myself at churchlegacy.org.uk.
Thank you.
Okay.
Is there any help for people who can't do online? Is there any, can they be posted something, or is there any help that you give?
Not at the moment. We do have a preparing to visit your solicitor form, which somebody can fill in, which helps them to think about their estate. It's a quite standard charity form. But the current free offering is online free wills only, just because of the complexity of the Church of England and ensuring that, you know, so the main thing was that we wanted a legacy going to St. Mary's to go to the right St. Mary's and not the 700 other St. Mary's that exist. But obviously a lot of people will use local solicitors. I've done a lot of legacy events where local solicitors have come along. That's fantastic. That's brilliant. I don't want to cause any detriment to those relationships. If you've got a local solicitors, fantastic. It's just during COVID, this was brought in because obviously a lot of solicitors' offices were shut, and it's just a free offering. It's just something, it's just an additional motivator, particularly for those people who are writing their first wills. So like I said, 1 in 4 people will leave a gift, but that means 1 in 3 aren't leaving a gift. And that's absolutely fine because they've written their will. And that's a really important part of Christian stewardship. And I would say to all of you here, you are all members of your church. If you want to rewrite your will or update your will using Fair Will and leave a legacy or not leave a legacy, that's absolutely great as well. It's here for you too.
I was only thinking of those older people who aren't online, you know, what support we could give them.
And I see that Donna has Donna is saying that she has established a relationship with a local office in Weybridge So there may well be a local firm of solicitors that would want to partner with the church and offer a free or discounted face-to-face service for those who don't like the online option.
Absolutely. And if you do have local solicitors, I really would encourage, if you're going to put any leaflets out or make information available, just drop them an email and say, just so you know, we've got information on our website about how people can leave legacies. We've got a handful of leaflets. Could we just drop them off and keep them? The amount of solicitors' offices I've gone into, and they've got like the Dog's Trust just like plastered everywhere. Wow. And I think, oh, can I just leave my church legacy leaflet here? So because a lot of local people will be using their local solicitors as well, and that's fantastic too. All right, any other questions or queries about that? No. Okay, great.
Can I just ask you to explain again, because I just didn't understand it, the reduction in inheritance tax from 40 to 36%. I just missed the detail of what you were saying.
Of course. And just to say, you know, you don't need to understand it, Fiona, because you're not a legal expert. You're not giving financial legal advice. Please don't give any legal advice. It's just something that it is a motivator for some people. Basically, if you leave a gift of 10% of your entire estate, so everything that you own, if you cut off 10% of a chunk and leave it to a charity or charities, it automatically reduces the amount of inheritance tax that you will pay on your overall estate from the standard is 40%. It will be reduced to 36%.
But that key number is 10%.
10%, yeah. And it can be multiple charities, and the church is a charity. But these are useful things to know. You don't need to be an expert in any of these legalities. It's just helpful to be aware of, and there are always questions that come up, so I just address them as part of it. Yes, David.
And even if the gift isn't 10% of the whole estate, it will still be fully written off against inheritance tax, yes. I believe.
Yeah, it's tax-free, any gift to charity.
Could you be a bit more specific about what is regarded as a simple will and a more complex will, where the line is drawn in terms of the fair will?
Sure. That's a very good question, Richard. It's usually where the affairs are fairly straightforward. So it's sort of it would be something like, you know, there's things like multiple marriages, children from different marriages, if you've got any trust funds that you want to set up, if you've got shares, or if you've got, I don't know, if your financial portfolio is considered complex, I suppose, then you wouldn't be eligible for the standard straightforward process. Because it's a standard process, it goes through, it asks you standard questions, and if you've got things outside of that remit, then it's not applicable for the bespoke journey. Sorry, I can't answer that better, Richard, but I will drop Fair Will an email and ask them if they've got any sort of standard guidelines as to what a simple will is. But that's my basic understanding.
I think it would be helpful if
sure,
there was some kind of definition before people start embarking on the journey, as it were.
Absolutely. That's fine. I'll drop them an email. They usually get back to me within a couple of hours, so I can send that round with the presentation. Okay. All right, final bit of the presentation then. Let's crack on. So, where's it gone? There it is. Okay, so the call to action, the 3 things that we really want you to go away and do. So like I said, you've got to ask, you need to inspire, highlight the importance of will writing, and then the free will offering is just, it's the mechanism that's there. And, you know, it's great to be able to offer it to some people who it's applicable to. But to really have an impact with your legacy campaign, one of the simplest things you can do is just include a line on legacies in your annual thank you letter. It sounds so simple, but like I say, we always start with a thank you. It's a gift. Any giving campaign should always start with a thank you. And let's start with the annual thank you letter. If we're honest, we don't always, we probably start with the template from last year. So it means that once it's on there, it's probably going to stay. So thank you for all your support over this year. We've been able to achieve X, Y, and Z, support X, Y, and Z people and groups. Thank you to everyone who's given weekly, monthly via the parish giving scheme, one-off donations to our, you know, organ appeal, and to everyone who has included a gift in their will. All these gifts help us to continue our mission and ministry to the community. I mean, very generic, but it's just in there. It's about embedding legacies. It's just another way to give, and it's really important we say thank you. So you can all do that. Every annual letter, thank you letter this year, I want to see legacies in, and then just keep it in. So that's a very easy thing you can all do, and you can all do straight away. The second is get some website content up. Like I said, you want to think about your church members, but you also want to think about your community. And like 85% of legacy inquiries are generally done online. People are looking for the wording, and that's either solicitors looking for the wording for their clients or individuals who want the information so that they can go and speak to their solicitors. So if you've got a giving page on your website, just make sure you've got some information on legacies. If you have a church near you page as well, you can link to legacy information there. That will come up in a Google search, and that's the same thing if you don't have a dedicated church website. Really important you include the wording, the example wording. So we always start with percentages of estates because they're the larger gifts. This is the official wording from the Church of England. I give free of all taxes to the parochial church council of the ecclesiastical parish of, include the name, include the address, include the postcode. Like I said, there are 700 St Mary's in the Church of England. In the diocese of, if you have a registered charity number because your income is over 100,000, include it there. For its general purposes, let's promote general legacies. And I declare that the receipt of an officer of the parochial church council shall be sufficient discharge to my executors and trustees. So that's really important that you provide the generic wording on your website, but also in any literature or materials that you're giving out as part of a legacy campaign or raising awareness. The second is include a link to Fair Will. So, it's online, the website's online, so you can include a direct link and say, you can now write your will for free. Simply enter the voucher code, which is Guildford-diocese at checkout. And then just make sure you've got some contact details. People do like to chat about their legacy or ask questions. So if there's somebody in the PCC or the church community who's happy to talk to people about legacies, put them there. If not, put David's name down. If not, put my name down. The main thing is if somebody wants to speak to somebody, they can. Now then, I know that's something that you actually have to do and you have to go away and do it. But like I said, legacy fundraising, it's like the oldest type of fundraising. So that information isn't going to change anytime soon. So again, once it's up, it's up. If you wanted to add to it over the years, include those inspiring stories. Take those legacies that have been left and just upload a picture and a couple of lines about the legacy, and that will just really bring the content to life. Again, this content you can then copy and paste into your own leaflet, into a parish magazine article. You can take some of the content and read it for notices. It doesn't change anywhere. The information that you're providing here is the same as anywhere else. So once it's done, it can then be used in different audiences and different formats. And then the final call to action is just to embed it in any upcoming giving campaign. I know David's working with a number of parishes on giving campaigns. Just make sure that legacies are in there. It's another way to give. It's another way to support. It's another way to thank God for a lifetime of his blessings. So whenever you're thinking about about giving campaigns in the next 6 months, 2 years, 5 years, 10 years, legacies are there. And those 3 simple steps really will start to generate legacies, because it's all just about making sure that legacies are visible and that giving is validated in your church. We've got lots of free national literature. I appreciate it looks a little bit archaic. My husband designed that when we were first dating, probably about 9 or 8 years ago. So it's about to be updated, but for now it's there. The content's fine. It's just very purple, but it's all free. You can just go on the CV print shop and order as much as you like. Just make sure some literature is available in church. Like I said, take it to your local solicitors. If you've got a village hall, a parish hall, make sure it's available there too. Again, it just helps to communicate that important legacy message to your church members and to your church community. And that's it. Those final call to actions: include a legacy thank you in your annual thank you letter, add information onto your website and link to the free online will writing service, and then just talk about legacies when you're thinking about any upcoming giving campaigns. I know you're all super busy and you take on so much and you do so much for your church, and I'm incredibly grateful. But with legacies, it's something that, you know, people do just have to take on board themselves, get some of this groundwork laid, and then it is there for future generations and for future PCC members to build on. And like I said, if you don't ask, you don't get. So please go back to your parish churches and ask.
Eleanor.
Right. Yes.
Eleanor, can I just say, first of all, an enormous thank you. Not only you're completely expert in this, but you're a wonderful communicator, and it's just been really clear and really motivating. I think it's given everybody the sense we can do this. Very, very easy and straightforward steps. There are a couple of questions on the chat, just to deal with those. I think Alwyn was asking about when the farewell offering expired, and I think you implied that the time limited was fairly flexible. So don't worry, the good folk of Aldershot will have their chance to have a free will thing. The other thing was a question in relating to wording of a legacy for a particular purpose. So the parish is presumably the general legal entity, the PCC of the parish is the legal entity which will be left, but whether you can specify a particular church within that parish, perhaps in a designated rather than restricted way, in case things choose. What's your advice on that?
Yeah, absolutely. So cathedrals are a really good one to look at if you're in your, you know, my second favourite cathedral in the country is Guildford Cathedral. I know that's.
You say that to all the dioceses.
I don't, honestly, I love Guildford Cathedral. I absolutely love Guildford Cathedral. But they've got some great legacy literature. Just see, because often cathedrals will have different trust funds, different, you know, music, they'll have fabric. So they're a great way to see how they set out those different funds to not make it confusing. But yeah, it just, instead of for general purposes, you just specify for the general purpose, you know, for use for the fabric and of the daughter church, or, you know, whatever. Try and make it as generic as possible. But if there's a particular recipient that you want to identify, then just have that as a separate will clause. Again, it's just about making things clear so people understand where legacies can be left and how they can do it, because that's what people want to do. They're not leaving you a legacy thinking, haha, I've messed up the wording, so it's going to be really difficult for them to administer. You know, they're leaving you a gift. They want to do it properly. They're often just not sure how, because we're not telling them.
Presumably they can express their wishes in a way which still maintains some flexibility. So if the church decides we don't want to do fabric anymore, then they can be used for other purposes.
So they can include a letter of wishes alongside their will, which is not legally binding. They can obviously have a conversation with you about how they'd like the legacy to be used, but also they can restrict it. And in my experience, if they're going to restrict the legacy, they're going to restrict the legacy. There's not a lot you can do about it. So it's just making sure that that restriction is as flexible as it can be.
Great. Eleanor, we are so grateful.
Well, could I just ask one question before you close? One area that you've not covered at all is the family. Well, sorry, you may have covered it, but very, very quickly. I mean, the majority of our colleagues have got families. I know David referred to somebody who not, but most of us have children, grandchildren, or other members of the family. And in a sense, it's they who are paying for the legacy. It's not the legator, because he or she is dead. The people who pay the legacies are the residuary beneficiaries who pay 60% or could be 64% of the amount of the legacy. And so what you've got to get over to people, or what we need to discuss, is how you get over to people that it's fair to ask your family to pay for your church.
Lovely, Lana. Thank you. Yeah. So I've got a favourite line. Leave 99% to your family and 1% to your church family. And I think actually that's really powerful, because it shows that you're your church is your family, but 1% compared to 99% doesn't sound like a huge amount, but it can have huge impacts at a local level for a parish. We actually have very little contentious probate in the church, hardly any actually. And generally speaking, family are incredibly supportive of legacies left to churches because they know how important the church was to their mum or to their loved one. And even in contentious probate cases I've been involved in, the church is the only one that the family aren't contesting. They'll contest it to RSPCA or to whoever, whichever charity, but not the church. So it is absolutely important that we make sure that you can't it's very difficult to force someone to leave a legacy because it's such a large gift. They either choose to leave it or they don't, in my experience. But yes, absolutely. Family is everyone's priority, and that's why writing a will is so important. But things like 99% to your family, 1% to your church family are useful hooks, doing it carefully and lovingly, but also in my experience, family are supportive of legacies left to the church, which is just wonderful and marvelous. And that's why I work in church legacies, because generally everyone's incredibly supportive of them. But thank you, really important note, Leonard.
Brilliant. And of course, the Chancellor helps with the 1%. So what's not to like? Eleanor, it's been a joy. Thank you so much.
Sure.
Really
Thank you
helpful.
for having me.